It comes to the New York Jets, it can never just be about football. We talked about that yesterday, myself, Dylan Term, and Chris Schubert. Always a little bit of drama surrounding the New York Jets. And this time of year, drama or not, there's going to be a ton of talk about the draft and free agency and what direction the team will go. Listen, every team has a lot of different options and a lot of different ways they can approach this thing. Joe Douglas is in a unique situation. He's never had so few picks, and he's never been on the hot seat like this. So we wanted to bring in somebody who's in the locker room, well, during the season, in the locker room, behind the scenes. Um, Antwan Staley, New York Jets beat writer for the New York Daily News. How are we doing today, Antwan?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Just watching as much as I can of the combine today. Just saw a tweet pop up. Matter of fact, your tweet. Braden Fisk, man, I don't know how many guys have helped their stock more than he has since the end of the season. We saw him in Mobile. He looked fantastic. Um, and
I
that's
liked him anyway.
yeah,
Just watching this film, I thought, this guy has made it, coming from Western Michigan, like he's made a lot of money just like the way he played last year. And then, yeah, Mobile, I thought he was really impressive there. Even before the week started, I detailed like players to watch out for, and he was one of them because I thought, from a Jets perspective, if you, for some chance, don't bring back a guy like Quentin Jefferson, I thought, he would be a good option for them, assuming that they would have a second round pick at some point, which they now with his stock rising the way that it is, he's definitely going second round. And if things continue to happen, like I wouldn't be totally surprised if he was to sneak in late first round
yeah,
somebody.
he's one of those guys that definitely you watch him on film and the effort is what jumps out, right? That the motor for a guy that big to be that nonstop was really impressive. And then he's sort of taken off down there. But as far as the Jets, you mentioned the possibility of a second round pick, which is great because I wanted to that's what I wanted to kick off with. We've talked on our show, we've interacted with the fans on Twitter about whether or not the likelihood of a trade down for the Jets, and some people have pointed out the fact, oh, that's not something Joe Douglas has ever done. And my answer to that is Joe Douglas has never had so few draft picks, and he's never been his seat's never been this hot. So he might be looking to trade down. What are the chances you think that happens? Do you think the Jets will be more aggressive in moving down? And how far do you think you can move down? Because we've discussed this on our show. How far do you think you can move down if you're the Jets and still get, assuming they want to get an offensive tackle with such a deep class? How far can you go and still get a guy that you believe can start for you at some point this year?
I mean, it's a few things. I think one is just going to depend on who's still on the board at 10. It's going to be one of those days like it happens like during real time, like during the draft. Like if for some and obviously all it's going to be off the board, then I imagine like in that case you might entertain it. And it also depends on what they do in free agency too. If they address the right tackle and then get some guard help too as well, or decide to put AVT at right tackle, then maybe yeah, you decide to trade down, especially if you have a guy like Fuaga that's 10, but he's a right tackle. He's really strictly a right tackle. So maybe you decide, we like Aquarius Mims from Georgia, or Fontenot from Washington, or Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, and those guys, and then you can get them in the 20s. So that's a potential option too. I mean, another option could be Johnson Powers Johnson from Oregon too. I think he's a stud too, and you can slide tipping over to the guard too as well. So I mean, they have a lot of options there. It just depends on how they're going to formulate and what's the plan for their offensive line, because I think that's what it's going to really revolve around, and who's on the board too at the time.
Yeah, I think the key that as you mentioned, is going to be who they're able to lock up in free agency. And we've talked a lot this offseason about how this is not a very strong offensive line class in free agency, but at the same time, as we did our deep dive on free agency yesterday on our show, kind of came to the conclusion as I was digging through the names and looking at watching some of these guys on film that the offensive tackle class is particularly weak. The guys at the top of the list have very real injury issues, which you would imagine the Jets want to avoid. And the guys who don't have the durability issues are sort of mid tier at best, probably lower mid tier. So again, some of them would still be upgrades, but that just speaks to the state of the Jets. But I think in looking at who's out there, and at least my perception would be I want a guy. I would like this team to attack the guard position where you might be able to get a couple of guys because there are, a handful of guards who are you look at a guy like Zeitler who's a little long in the tooth, but if you can get him on a 2-year deal, now prying him away from Baltimore if they want him back is not going to be easy.
Yeah,
One thing
a
the
guy
Jets,
like Robert Hunt too, who's gonna, Chris Greer, the Dolphins general manager, said he's gonna test free agency. So, I mean, that's an option too. I think he's a solid guard. I think
yeah,
he's a really solid guard for the Dolphins. The last few years too. So that's also an option too as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
no, no, that's fine, and that's the thing is these guys, your guards obviously going to cost you a little bit less money, but you're going to get a higher quality player than you are at the tackle spots. So, do you? Joe Douglas talked about this the other day. Elijah's only going to play one position. We're not going to move him around. So if you're the Jets, I mean, it sounds like you kind of see where I'm coming from here. Would you attack guard and obviously try to get a tackle or two, guys who may end up not even starting if you can upgrade through the draft, and maybe AVT kicks out the tackle. But would you go after more guards and build from the interior? And as you mentioned, the possibility you could move Tippmann if you had to.
Yeah, I mean, like in Douglas, and I asked him about the offensive line. That was my question, and then he was like, AVT's versatility kind of gives them, a variety of different options. They can move him at right tackle. Obviously, I mean, he's played every position but center. So
Yeah.
for me, I would put him at right tackle. I mean, obviously, that also gives him a chance to make the most amount of money when it comes to his contract and
Yep.
everything like that. I don't know if the Jets are willing to want to pay him now, but you have that 5th year option, which I assume they'll exercise there, and it gives them an additional year where they can evaluate him and then see if he can stay healthy. That's really the main thing. Obviously, moving him around, I don't know how much it contributed, but it probably didn't help either. The last couple of years, whether you talk about the torn triceps or obviously a freak injury like an Achilles. But yeah, having those guys, having 2 cornerstone offensive linemen that you hope can be part of your team, like Tippin and also AVT, that you can both move around, certainly gives them a lot of different options too, whether it be the draft or also free agency. So yeah, I think for me, like I definitely look at guards and then try to figure things out and then try to piece it together and see where you come at heading into the draft and potentially finding another starter there.
And now, should they position themselves, as we discussed earlier, possibly trading down? You and I had a somewhat of a funny conversation earlier on Twitter. Fans are so hyper focused on offensive line that they don't even want to discuss the possible options on defense that they might pick in the draft. Which, I mean, listen, the Jets' defense is good, but it is not perfect, and they have needs. They have spots where they need to get better. They have spots where they just don't have enough bodies. They just need people that play that position. The two that come to mind for me that we discussed briefly: defensive tackle and safety. You profiled earlier today a guy who my favorite D lineman in the class, Tavondre Sweat. We saw him in Mobile, in person. He's as big as you would imagine for a guy that checks in at 360, more than just a run stuffer, collapses the pocket. Share some of your thoughts on Tavondre Sweat and just in general where the Jets, where some of the Jets' options on the defensive side of the ball, specifically through the draft, because I think, again, they will address it in free agency, but the draft is where some fans seem to be sort of in a state of denial that no defensive players. And it's
Well,
like, you need to prepare yourself. There's going to be some. It might only be two or three, but it certainly isn't going to be zero.
Well, first, I mean, you got a defensive head coach, so I mean, his background, they're going to take defensive players. I mean, so and then also, quite frankly, it seems like Bryce Hubb might be off the door, so that's also another need that you're gonna have to replace those 10 sets somewhere, whether it be by committee or just by one particular player. But yeah, I definitely think defensive tackle. I mean, you look at the run defense last year, and then yeah, I think and I talked to Will Parkinson about this. I don't think the Jets' run defense is as bad as what it says statistically. However, they gave up a lot of explosive runs. Whether you talk about the Giants game after Al Woods went out, or the Raiders game when Josh Jacobs went for that long run, and I think helped set up kind of the touchdown late in that game. So yeah, you definitely got to address the run defense. Like it was legitimately a problem throughout the course of the year. So yeah, and when they were not the same when Al Woods went out, and then that's why I profile Sweat, because I feel like he would be a great complement to a guy like Quentin Williams, who we know like what he can do. Like he's an all-around player. Whether you talk about rushing the passer, but also in the run defense too. But he needs help. I mean, the man was getting double and triple team at times, and then as good as I thought Quentin Jefferson did a solid job there. they could bring him back there. But you need somebody that not only can stop the run, but also do other things too. And then get rotational guy. And we know the Jets like to rotate a lot of
Yes.
different guys on the line too. And having a guy like Sweat, where you're not asking him to play, to be necessarily a 3 down guy, but he can be if
Hmm.
need be. So yeah, I think it'd be a great compliment to Quentin and everything that he does. But if that doesn't come to fruition there, we talked about Braden Frisk. I thought he would be, tremendous ad for them too as well. I mean, somebody that can obviously rush the passer, but also, we saw him at the combine for the 40. Like he's so quick. He's quicker than I even thought he was,
Yeah.
and then very agile. So yeah, I think he's an option there. Chris Jenkins, obviously, bloodline there. We
Yep.
obviously know his father played for the Jets too, and was effective throughout the 2009 season. So I think he would be quite an option too. If you're talking about the draft as well. So any of those three guys, I definitely think will be a really good fit for the Jets.
Any thought the only guy you didn't mention who I really love, he's my favorite guy up there with not, Sweat's kind of above everybody, but one of my guys, McKinley Jackson, Texas A&M. Any thoughts
Yes.
on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what they do, what the Jets do. Also, like I think it fits like what he does, like some of his skill set too. Like he can move there, has really good hands there, good punch there, and very strong. Like I think he's very strong. His strength really stands out to me too. Just watching some of the Aggies games throughout the course of the year. So yeah, if you're able to get a guy like that, I definitely think that would be fill a big hole, especially in the middle of that interior. It's like you said, it's not like the Jets have a ton of needs defensively, but they definitely have some. And then of course, like I said, if Bryce Huff were to leave, then you have another hole that you have to fill too. Although you're kind of hoping Will McDonald can help, fill a little bit of that void, but you still need bodies there that can help. I don't know if you want to expect Will McDonald to go out and get 10 sacks, but you definitely need somebody else in a rotational spot too, especially considering you're also going to depart from Carl Lawson as well.
Yeah, and I think you pointing out the run defense, which was an Achilles heel at some point for them this year. I think a big part of that too, if you look back, that felt like there were a lot of big runs where there's some tackles missed by the safeties.
Yeah,
And you just feel like there was a hat on a hat, and the lineman couldn't get freed up, but a safety had a shot to make a tackle. It didn't happen, so that's another spot they're going to look at. I'm a big Malik Mustafa guy. I like Jaden Hicks quite a bit. Evan Williams will be a later round guy. He flashed
yeah,
at the Senior Bowl. Loved him at Washington State. Looks like he played well again at Oregon. And
he
all
did.
those guys sort of have that ability. Cole Bishop to a lesser degree, another guy. These guys can move around. Like they're athletic enough that a defensive guy like Robert Sala probably says, this is a piece that I want. Do you think they go safety? And what do you think the future holds for Chuck Clark? Do they bring him back?
I think it depends on what they decide to do with Jordan Whitehead. I mean, if they don't bring him back, then I think bringing Chuck Clark back, maybe like on a prove it deal, and also adding a young safety too, and then bringing back Ashton Davis. I thought Davis played really well late in the year too. So if you have those combinations. I think you're feeling really good at safety, and kind of what you alluded to there. Jordan Whitehead, I mean, he's not a bad player, not by any means. I know he's taking a lot of criticism in particular. I really feel like probably more in 2022 than 2023, where he has some missed assignments there. But yeah, I think the missed tackles there were a big question as well. I mean, he is a ball hawk at times, especially when he plays the Bills. For whatever reason, he
Yeah.
plays
It's weird,
Josh
right? How
Allen
some
particularly
guys
very
just have,
well.
yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think they can get better there. I think Whitehead is kind of a mix. Yeah, he kind of reminds me of an older school type of safety where he's a little bit of a liability sometimes in coverage there, and I think teams try to attack down because of that. So I mean, especially when you're looking at you're not gonna go out the sauce. DJ Reed I think has been really tremendously really good, and then Michael Carter the second might be best slots cornerback in football. So yeah, where you try to attack the Jets is within the middle of the field and deep balls and the safeties, and I think that's where they have to get some things cleaned up there.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ashton Davis. We talked about it during the year. I mean, he didn't play a ton of reps, of course, but I thought that was the best version of him we've seen since he got here. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not the Jets bring him back. But getting back to the free agency questions about the offensive line, I want to double back because first off, one name I threw this name around a little bit last year. People were kind of lukewarm to it, but now I've seen more and more folks after seeing the way he played last year. People saying, "Oh, you know what? Why don't we try to bring George Fant back?" You were obviously in the locker room when he was there. Is that something you could see the Jets exploring?
For what I understand, like that is not an option. Like yeah, was not very happy. Put it that way when he was with the Jets too, and I understand it too. You got to look at it from his perspective too. Like Dwayne Brown, like in Seattle, Dwayne Brown essentially replaced him there, and then with the Jets, the same thing. Like he was, looked at to be possibly the left tackle, and then they end up bringing Dwayne Brown, signing him, and then they move Fant over, and then of course he gets hurt, and was just very unhappy. So, for what I understand, just talking with people, especially in Houston, that I know a few of the Texans writers. Yeah, that is just not on in the cards whatsoever.
Which is this, I mean, I always liked Fant, good soldier, and I completely, I've even said in the past when I've lobbied for him to come back, I always kind of caveat like if there's no bad blood, because you can kind of see you're going to play here, you're going to play there, you're going to sit, we're going to start you. He never had the stability that he probably was looking for, and then he gets hurt and let go. So it's a shame. He actually, our one of our hosts, Dylan Terman, tweeted about it a few days ago, saying he'd like Fant back. Fant actually replied, and then deleted it, but it was sort of an ominous reply. He just sort of Dylan just said how good it would be to have him back, and Fant just replied, "I question," and that was it. And it stayed up for
There,
about
there,
an hour, and then it went.
there
And
you
I'm like,
go.
was that? I don't know if he was questioning Dylan wanting him back or questioning whether he should come back. Because even if he's considering it, I think the Jets should pick up the phone. But one thing the
Yeah,
Jets are going to have to
he was good
what
last year. So yeah,
he
I mean,
was,
if he can, get past like some things that from what I understand, he was upset with. Yeah, you definitely want to entertain it because I think if he can play like how he did in 2023, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he would be a huge upgrade at the tackle position on either side, whether it be
yeah,
left or
that's
right tackle.
and he's one of those rare guys that I feel is better on the left, right? Because that's the tougher
Yes,
spot where usually if a guy plays both, he's stronger on the right. But I've always felt like he was better on the left side.
same
But
here.
yeah, but whether it's going to be him or anybody else, and this will be the last question we'll touch on. And this is something we've all been aware of, but now as free agency is creeping closer, as a fan, I'm getting more and more concerned about it since it's becoming real. Um, the situation with Keith Carter, the offensive line coach. Now we saw what a month ago, whenever it was, and to me, this is about as bad a look as you can get. His former Pro Bowl tackle Taylor Lewan takes to Twitter and says the only time in my life I didn't enjoy being in the NFL was when I played for Keith Carter. That's bad enough on its own. Um, but then you get Mekhi Becton who laughs at it, like kind of agreeing and laughs at Luan's statement, and then Brees Hall jumps in too, and he laughs at it in comments. And I'm thinking you have currently under contract players mocking a guy who is currently on your coaching staff. If and listen, the NFL, it's a small world. Like these guys talk. If guys like Taylor Lewan or Mekhi Becton, whatever you think or don't think of him, if other free agents are calling and saying, "Hey, man, I'm thinking about coming to New York. What's it like?" And if these guys are going to say, "Dude, stay away from there. Don't, find somewhere else." My concern is that the in-demand guys are going to have 5 or 6 offers to pair through, and the Jets are one of the first ones they're going to toss away because of having a coach that guys don't want to play for. And the Jets are going to be left going for the guys who maybe only have 1 or 2 offers and kind of are willing to play for a guy that may not be loved because they don't have a lot of options. Um, do you think the Carter thing is going to impact it? And are you surprised that there wasn't more heat from ownership to Salah if the guy's not liked in the room, Keith Carter, to look at a different coach?
Yeah, to answer your second question first, I'm not surprised that it's not simply because I mean it's a win and it's pretty much like they have to win this year. And then I don't know if they want to change. It would have been the third offensive line coach in 3 years. They had John Benton, the year before that. So I don't know if they necessarily they probably trying to look for some continuity. So I think as bad as that look, and that looked really bad. Like they probably was like, okay, let's cooler heads prevail, and then maybe we can revisit this thing and try to figure out. I would hope figure out what's their beef, especially when you have guys that were, or at least under with Brees case under contract anyway. Because if they're saying it, then you have to know it's probably even more people in that locker room who are still
Exactly.
under contract that probably feel very similar because the players talk all the time. Like I think the biggest thing that I worry about is in a year where you have to win, you want players like you have to be able to motivate players and be able to lead. And if they're not following you and they're criticizing you out in the open like that, because players don't typically do that unless
That's what I mean.
you give them a very good reason like that. I mean, I've heard it in the locker room. I've heard players off the record, say certain things about certain coaches, but for it to be that blatant and direct, or in like in real time, exactly like that's not good. Like, it's not good on so many different levels. So I hope it was something Robert had addressed with the team and taken a look at. If he hasn't, then I don't know. He's definitely not doing his job
Well,
too.
that's the thing because it happened postseason, right? They haven't been together as a team since it
But
happened.
still, like, you don't have
Talk to
you're not
certain
there,
guys.
but you can reach out like on the phone or text or something like that, because everybody's going to be in different locations. But
Right.
yeah, you want to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible, because you want to, especially during the season, and especially what I think like it's going to be a help. Like, they got to win. Like, we already know what the season is
Yeah.
going to be. Doug Douglas talked about it at the combine. He understands the pressure. You need everybody to be on the same page. You have to. Otherwise, then this thing can unravel quickly and in a hurry.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I said last one, but someone in the chat asked a
You
question,
good.
our buddy Biff, and
Yeah.
I actually meant to touch on this because it's kind of mixed messages. Having mentioned Becton kind of clowning the coach on Twitter, um, once he did that, I figured, well, he's out, he's leaving. Like you don't publicly criticize a coach if you're going to stay with a team. But then there were some comments that he wants to return, he wants to play with Aaron Rodgers, they formed a good relationship and all that. Um, I've I feel like the only reason there could have been a possibility Becton would return is because, as we discussed, a very weak O line class. Like you're gonna bring in guys who will probably be on Becton's level anyway. In terms of level of play. So do you consider bringing him back for continuity? And last year he had that stretch of 4 or 5. Like he was fine the final week, but the 4 weeks leading up to that, at least in my mind, was the worst we've ever seen him play as a pro. I'm watching
Yes.
him thinking, I know his haters are enjoying this, but I'm just watching him and thinking something's not right. Like you can say he's been up and down, but he was just so bad for a few weeks and then bounced back the final week, whatever, that was fine. But in your mind, is there any path to him returning, or do the Jets want to wash their hands of it? Or is Joe Douglas tempted to say, I would love to resurrect my first ever draft pick and sort of not just improve my O line, but beef up my resume?
It's like yeah, last year was very interesting with him because, yeah, like you said, I think it was a stretch where at least early in the year I was like, okay, he's playing really well, like early on,
Exactly.
and then it became like halfway through the season it was not, and then he got hurt. He had like a low ankle sprain. I think they
Right.
kept him out. Maybe I think the first Dolphins game, if I'm correct. And then he came back, and then he definitely wasn't the same after that. I don't know if he was not not healthy or whatever the case may be. He struggled with penalties too. Like, it was a
Yep.
lot of penalties. Ended up giving up 12 sacks too as well. I If I had to bet, I would probably say no. I don't think he's going to return. But yeah, you spoke on it. Aaron Rodgers was like his biggest advocate. So if Aaron really,
And
really
we
wants him to
that's the best advocate to have if you
yeah,
want to be a Jet and
it's
Aaron likes you.
possible. However, like, I don't like, he just didn't particularly play very well last year. So I'm like,
That's
I don't
That's
know.
the thing. It was I think and this is just I think if he's gonna have to take like a very small 1 year deal, 1 year prove it deal that's not worth anywhere near what he's hoping to get. But I don't think he's back. I don't think he's back. I don't think it's as outlandish. Like a couple months ago, I thought no way. But then as the more you look at the free agent class, you're like, he's gonna be as good or better than some of these guys. So
But they
and
could
and
just
and
let
I
him move on too, because like you also have to look at it like the whole his during his whole time with the Jets too. Like, it just been like very
always something.
tumultuous, very tumultuous. Whether you talk about obviously the injuries, but also just some of the off the field stuff, whether the Twitter and him wanting to be left tackle and voicing it, and they were not happy about that by any means. I can tell you that right now. So they could be looking to move. It could be better, one of those situations where it's better just to kind of move on and wash your hands, and hopefully he can resurrect his career so elsewhere.
Yeah, I did think I that interview you mentioned when he came out and said, I got hurt because they ignored me when I said I was hurt. At that moment, I thought they might get rid of him before the season starts. Like you've
Yes,
just outwardly accused them of malpractice
yeah, that was
and
the
costing
Newsday
you.
article. Like, yeah, the Bob Glauber article, like, yeah, I was like, yeah, that was
Yeah,
not too long after, I wanna be the left tackle, and then he
right.
was playing about I was like, "Yeah, this
And it
ain't
was so
good."
upsetting because he was literally for the first time in 2 years about to play football, and you're like, finally the focus can be football with him, and then this article comes out, and you're like, why can't it just be about football?
Correct.
And that was a whole nother ball game. But Antwan Staley of the New York Daily News, Jets beat writer, thanks so much for joining us, Antwan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. Go ahead and give out your social media handle. We will cut you loose and do this again sometime, hopefully.
Yeah, it's just simple. My name, Antwan Staley, across all social media platforms. So, and then you can find my work at the Daily News. So, yeah, man, thank you for having me on, and yeah, hopefully I can come back soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Antwan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, you too.
All right. So that'll wrap this one up for us Jets fans. Antwan Staley, great having him on. Ran into him in I almost said Indy, down in Mobile. Bumped into him on the way up to the Senior Bowl check-in, and he couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been more professional, and thought, man, we'd love to have you on. So glad we were able to get that knocked out. Get Antwan on the show. Thanks for tuning in to listen in and listen. Interesting times for the Jets. Joe Douglas is going to have to pursue. He's going to have to work overtime to add free agent linemen, and it appears the Jets have a offensive line coach that not many people are going to want to play for. So Joe D will either be missing out or overpaying, one of the two. And we'll know in a few weeks. Get back to watching the combine. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one, Jets fans.